This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Yemen airport blast death toll rises to 26. Tropical storm Chalane lands in Mozambique. And Tunisia extends nighttime curfew amid a spike in coronavirus cases. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines. China and the EU agree on ways to boost bilateral trade and market access. And on CGTN's Pandemic Warrior series, we look at key individuals who kept things running at the height of the coronavirus lockdown. Well, at least 16 people have been killed, with some sources claiming as many as 26 following an attack on Yemen's Aden airport. Loud blasts and gunfire were heard after a plane carrying the newly formed Yemeni government arrived from Saudi Arabia. Prime Minister Mayin Abdulmalik, as well as the Saudi ambassador to Yemen and other cabinet members, have been safely transferred to the city's presidential palace. Yemen's government was sworn in late December by President Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi as part of a power-sharing deal brokered by Saudi Arabia in 2019. Its formation is the result of a compromise between the UAE-backed separatists in the Southern Transitional Council and Saudi-backed loyalists of President Hadi. Earlier, we spoke to Murad Abdu, a local journalist.
About 3 explosions struck the international airport of Aden, while the government members and including the Prime Minister were inside the airplane, and the explosions killed nearly 27 people, according to the medical centers in Aden till the moment. About the source of the explosions, no information available to the moment, but local security sources said that about 3 missiles fired from a neighboring area outside Aden, but no exact information.
China and the European Union have reached a major investment deal that's been several years in the making, and tonight both sides say negotiations are complete. The announcement was made via video link following a meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping, his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, along with the heads of the European Council and the European Commission. President Xi says the deal shows China's determination and confidence in further opening up its economy to the rest of the world. He says it will help the world's 2 major markets make significant contributions to a more inclusive global economy. Well, analysts say this investment deal will not only provide more business opportunities, but also more protection for investors. Our reporter Chui Hu has more on this from the Chinese Commerce Ministry.
Well, the wrap-up of negotiations on the China-EU bilateral investment treaty comes to just before the year ends, and this agreement is very significant for both China and the EU. The deal has been in the works for 7 years and has been through 35 rounds of negotiations. And the talks accelerated this year despite the pandemic. And tonight, China's officials from Ministry of Commerce say it will be a very high-level deal, which covers a wide range of areas, including market access, fair competition, and sustainable development. The details have not been released, but analysts predict it will provide tremendous opportunities for both Chinese and European companies. They say it will also provide more protections for investors from both sides, as well as a more level playing field. And it will also boost the exchange of not just goods, but also personnel, technology, and capital. China has replaced the U.S. as the EU's largest trading partner over the last quarter. And in the first 11 months this year, bilateral trade jumped by 4.7% on a yearly basis to $620 billion. And every minute, around $1 million of goods are traded between the 2 economies. So trade relations are very, very robust, and this new agreement is expected to further cement them.
British lawmakers are set to vote on a post-Brexit trade deal with the EU on Wednesday. With both main parties due to vote in favor, the bill is expected to easily pass. The EU's top officials have formally signed the agreement, and Prime Minister Boris Johnson is urging legislators to back the deal. The agreement will preserve Britain's tariff and quota-free access to the bloc's 450 million consumers until at least the end of February. It will then become permanent upon receiving final approval from the European Parliament. Britain formally left the EU nearly a year ago, and the EU Partnership Agreement will regulate ties from January the 1st on everything from trade to transport, energy links, and fishing. In other big news in Britain, the government just approved the coronavirus vaccine developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University. Partial results suggest the shots are safe and about 70% effective. The first doses will be given on Monday. The vaccine is expected to be used by many countries because of its low cost, availability, and ease of use. It can be kept in the refrigerators rather than the ultra cold storage some other vaccines require. We're now joined by Andrew Wilson in Oxford for the latest on this. Thank you so much for joining us, Andrew. Can you tell us what happens next after Britain approved the Oxford AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine?
Well, the UK authorities have had the advantage that they've been expecting this approval. There was no reason to believe really that the vaccine would not be approved. So they've been able to get themselves organised ahead of this. They've already purchased, the government's already purchased 100 million doses. It's a 2-dose vaccine, so that's 50 million treatments there, which is pretty much the entire adult population of the UK. So they've got enough down the line. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, said today they had about 550,000 vaccine doses ready to go on Monday. So this week, coming after the weekend, they'll start rolling out the treatment. As you said in your introduction, it's a much easier vaccine to deal with. It's cheaper, but also it only needs to be refrigerated in a normal cold store. So it can be moved around, it's much more stable, and it can be deployed in smaller packets to smaller parts of the country for more local administration and local delivery of the inoculation. So there is every chance that this will run quite smoothly. The other modification they've made is they said that people can have the first dose but not wait until 12 weeks before they have the second dose, which is a longer break. And what that means is they can concentrate on giving more people the first shot before they start moving on to giving the second shot, which gives them a chance to get more people enrolled on the program. There is a certain amount of protection offered just by the first shot, but the second booster dose is the one that gives more long-term immunity. So we're hopeful that things are going to start moving fairly quickly as of Monday, the 4th of January.
Andrew, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is also expected to speak any time now. Do we know what he's likely to talk about?
The Prime Minister is now speaking. I can see him on my monitor. He's come in for the usual press briefing from the Downing Street briefing room. He's flanked by his Chief Medical Officer and Chief Scientific Advisor. It was going to be a regular briefing anyway, but the Prime Minister chose to take it because, of course, he's front and centre of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccination, so he wants to be the one to deliver that good news to the country, because Boris Johnson is a Prime Minister who really enjoys delivering good news. But also there's been some terrible figures today, 981 more deaths in the last 24 hours from coronavirus, an escalation in Tier 4 restrictions on homes. 75% of the country from midnight tonight will now be put under Tier 4 restrictions. That's almost the entire country going dark and being confined to their homes, apart from education or travelling for business. And then the remainder of the country will be under Tier 3. So really an acceptance that whilst this vaccine has come out, Boris Johnson is now on the podium having to explain to the public just how seriously out of control this new variant of the virus has become across the UK, and how not only will people's living situation be confined again for an unpredictable amount of time, but also today there's the announcement that schools will be going back later than expected. They should have gone back on Monday the 4th. It now looks like most schools, secondary and universities, won't go back until January the 18th to give the government time to get more testing out to the educational establishments as well, to try and ensure the safety of the staff and students in all those establishments around the country. So a real rearguard action being made with one hand, while at the other hand, of course, declaring this good news about the vaccine being ready to roll out.
Thank you so much for that. Andrew Wilson speaking to us from Oxford. Well, the second wave of the coronavirus pandemic has seen the number of COVID-19 cases in Nigeria rebound significantly. By Tuesday, the federal government of Nigeria had announced a total of 84,811 confirmed cases and 1,263 deaths. The government has ordered the reopening of all isolation and treatment centers and called on members of the public to protect themselves. Health officials in Nigeria have listed gathering and movement of people as the cause of the acceleration of cases. Researchers in Nigeria are studying the new mutant strain that was discovered in the country but differs from that found in South Africa and the UK.
Past 2-3 weeks, there seemed to have been a rapid increase in incidents reported. That could be due to various reasons until a connection is made between mutation or the new mutant and this, what we are seeing. We will for now not say that is the reason.
Well, South Africa's Department of Home Affairs will deploy additional immigration officials at 6 busiest land ports of entry to process returning travelers. Traveler volumes are expected to be above normal because of people returning to South Africa from their holiday destinations. Home Affairs officials are avoiding the chaos that ensued last week on the South African side of the Beitbridge border with Zimbabwe. CGTN's Listen Jamela reports.
Travelers seeking entry into Zimbabwe at the border post spent most of last week at the port of entry in queues stretching several kilometers. There were long lines of stationary cars, mainly trucks. The queues had been slowed down by coronavirus screening. At least 5 people died there. And the Road Freight Association attributed the deaths to lack of water, heat, and other conditions at the border. Home Affairs Ministry, however, disputes this.
The other deaths occurred long before the increased activity associated with holiday season. So there was, of course, some mortality, which had nothing to do with truck driving, which, as I said, occurs throughout the whole year. And in the month of December, it occurred on the 8th of December, on the 13th of December, on the 14th of December, and on the 22nd of December. As you can see, it was long before the period of the congestion.
The Beitbridge border post is more busy than usual at this time of the year. This is because of a seasonal return of migrants to Zimbabwe from here in South Africa. To avoid a repeat of the chaotic scenes at the border, the ministry will add extra immigration personnel.
The immigration officers and the soldiers will not be there to stop people from coming into South Africa. I must emphasize that. They won't be there to say, no, please don't come into South Africa. No, but they will definitely be there to insist, without any fear or favor, that anybody wishing to visit South Africa must use the official gates of entry and produce all the requisite documentation. Otherwise, they simply won't be allowed in.
Additional port health officials will also be deployed to ensure compliance with COVID-19 regulations.
South Africa will not let any traveller into the country without a valid COVID-19 certificate, a certificate that indicates a negative COVID-19 test result, and it shouldn't be older than 72 hours from the time of departure.
Only truck drivers are exempted from the test requirements.
Alternatively, those without PCR test will be subjected to a rapid antigen test at the point of entry. On their own costs. I must emphasize that. Each one will have to pay for their own test.
On Monday, President Cyril Ramaphosa moved South Africa back to lockdown level 3. This as infections surpassed the 1 million mark and as the country is battling a second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yodi Sanjamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Tunisia has extended a nighttime curfew until mid-January. This in a bid to tackle spiking coronavirus cases there. The move comes amid growing discontent and anti-government protests in Tunisia. Adin Shiwashi has more.
Health authorities in Tunisia warned that gathering for New Year's Eve could cause a sudden surge in infections and deaths, while hospitals' intensive care units are saturated with COVID-19 patients.
We will not lose anything by not celebrating New Year's Eve this week, but we could lose so much more if we do celebrate it and ignore the prevention measures. All public gatherings, concerts, and celebrations are banned to save lives. For weeks, Tunisians have ignored our advice. Now the number of deaths is on the rise. At least 75 people are hospitalized every day.
Restrictive measures imposed during the winter and holiday season could further complicate the situation. Analysts assert that at least 27,000 permanent jobs, as well as some 12,000 temporary and seasonal jobs, were lost in the tourism industry due to strict health protocols and travel bans.
The tourism industry in Tunisia is one of the most affected sectors by the pandemic. Tourism revenues are down by 66% in 2020. Tourism growth will not exceed 33% in 2021. The losses are enormous, and the measures to contain the pandemic have devastated the tourism industry.
A recent study conducted by the private sector has shown that over 72% of Tunisians reject the new measures imposed by the state because they will have social and economic consequences on millions of citizens.
The situation is very difficult on all levels. I hope the new measures will really save lives, but in the meantime, many families are pushed into poverty. Who's going to help those in need? The state imposes restrictions, but ignores its social and economic consequences.
According to the latest report published by the Scientific Committee at the Health Ministry, the number of recoveries reached 102,000. Out of 133,000 active cases, 6,706 patients are currently hospitalized, including 332 in intensive care units and 109 on life support in public and private healthcare facilities.
Prime Minister Hisham Mashishi has called for intensified control campaigns this week to ensure compliance with the law and to report violators of the decisions of the COVID-19 task force to prevent the spread of the virus. Over 10,000 policemen will be deployed for this operation. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
More news making headlines after the break, including tropical storm Chalane lands in Mozambique.
As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to ravage through the world, forcing many countries into multiple lockdowns, in Kenya, 5 individuals who had qualified for the already postponed Tokyo 2020 Olympics are continuing to sharpen their skills. Christine Ongare is a boxer who has qualified for her first ever Olympic Games. Her coach, David Munuhe, is on his second stint, having featured in the 2016 edition. For rugby coach Felix Olo and Kenya's women's sevens captain Philadelphia Orlando, this is a chance for the team to go a step further in the tournament. While for Mutile Yavi, who switched citizenship from Kenya to Bahrain, this is a chance to prove herself as an elite runner after failing to make the Kenya Youth Athletics team.
Welcome back. You're watching News Making Headlines right here on Africa Live. Well, the surge of COVID-19 cases in Uganda continues to take a toll on the country's healthcare system. Health professionals warn that the new COVID-19 variant could worsen the situation. Leon Seyanga reports.
9 months into the COVID-19 pandemic and cases continue rising faster than before. Patients keep arriving at the National Hospital in Kampala for treatment, but intensive care units here are already full.
Almost all patients are referred to Murago National Referral Hospital. from other hospitals in critical conditions. You are aware about it. And some arrived to from ICUs, from other hospitals, ICU, of other hospitals with late stage of the disease.
Uganda has so far registered over 33,000 COVID-19 cases. The capital accounts for more than half that number. Facilities are strained and authorities are worried.
We really would not want to get into that scenario where you get into a hospital and you're not able to provide you with a bed. So we really want that people do not transition from mild to moderate and to severe. They should be able to get to care as early as possible.
Adding to fears over the surge in cases is the new variant of coronavirus, already reported in South Africa, and spread to Uganda would pile pressure on its healthcare systems.
At the moment, our health system is performing to the extent that we still need to improve, whether there's a variant or not, and we'll benefit from improving it.
Health authorities say the country is in the process of procuring over 35 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. About 9 million Ugandans will be inoculated in the first phase. The vaccines will be available early next year. Until then, health experts insist wearing a face mask, social distancing, and avoiding large gatherings will ease the spread of the coronavirus. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
A powerful tropical storm has made its landfall near the central Mozambican city of Beira. This happened early on Wednesday, bringing heavy rainfall and wind to that area. Beira is a low-lying coastal city hosting about 500,000 people. The region was previously devastated by Cyclone Idai about 2 years ago, displacing tens of thousands of people. Experts are now reporting that sustained winds of 85 kilometers per hour with gusts exceeding 20 kilometers per hour. The storm is said to be moving inland through Mozambique and towards Zimbabwe. Well, earlier we spoke to Gorgmuz Husanov, who's the head of the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies in Mozambique, to give us more details about what is happening on the ground there.
Coronavirus is a huge concern to the humanitarian workers, including to the Mozambique Red Cross as well as to the government of Mozambique. Comparatively, the cases in Mozambique is much smaller than the other countries within the Africa or in the world. However, it's our main responsibility to making sure that we follow the guidelines established by the government of Mozambique and the Ministry of Health as well. The IFRC has also developed a protocol which we are usually utilizing when we provide humanitarian assistance to the beneficiaries. We have measures put in place, making sure that the beneficiaries are having masks to put on, at the same time to follow the distances, and there are areas where designated where the beneficiaries could go and get their humanitarian relief. So we have got preparatory stuff in place, and we had the relief items in place to respond. So I would say Mozambique Red Cross was more or less ready to respond to the cyclone Chalane.
On to Somalia now, and the much-awaited general elections planned for December have been moved to January. The Electoral Commission plans to commence with the election of senators, followed by parliament and presidential vote. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello reports.
In a statement, the Federal Electoral Implementation Team says the election for members of the Upper House of Parliament has been postponed until next week. The polls initially planned to start Thursday, 31st December, has now been moved to 7th January 2021. It's the third postponement in less than a month, with the opposition skeptic about the polls. The Commission says the move to reschedule the election timetable was agreed upon after Galmudug Regional President Ahmed Abdikariye asked for an extension to the previous deadline. Regional parliaments from Somalia's 5 federal member states will elect the senators from the 7th to 14th January next year. Polls are expected to start in some regional states that enjoy close cooperation with the federal government, while others like Puntland and Jubaland are yet to confirm their participation. Meanwhile, opposition politicians, including presidential candidates, want the Electoral Commission disbanded, claiming it's made up of president's allies, a claim the government has denied.
Based on the current circumstances, it's not likely that compromise will be reached on the electoral impasse. It's however likely that elections will happen in some regional states. Politically, this will impact the outcome of the electoral cycle, as Parliament and Senate will be formed with the absence of some representatives.
Election for lawmakers and senators from Somaliland and Banaadir region will take place in the capital, Mogadishu, as polls cannot be held in the breakaway region that's seeking independence from Somalia. As per an electoral deal reached in September, polls will be held in 2 constituencies in the country's 5 regional states. Authorities say they've beefed up security in all election venues. The Al-Qaeda-linked militant group Al-Shabaab has threatened to disrupt the polls.
The Council of Ministers has been briefed. Security preparations is well underway. Sector commanders have met with the Prime Minister and they have assured us of election security.
Elsewhere, a Mogadishu-based think tank is hosting government officials and the opposition politicians in Garowe, the administrative capital of the Puntland state in the country's northeast. The annual event by the Heritage Institute will focus on the country's future amid an electoral impasse. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Sudan is expected to announce a cabinet reshuffle soon. The move comes as the nation tries to accommodate representatives from the militia and the fronts who signed the Juba peace agreement in October. The announcement, however, has been taking more time than originally planned as the negotiations of the power distribution in the cabinet intensifies. Here's Adel Al-Marouchi with more.
In November, the country amended its constitutional declaration to include the Juba peace agreement and lift the ban over members of the transitional bodies to run for elections. Accordingly, the government must be restructured. With most parties agreeing to keep Abdullah Hamdok as prime minister, Sudan is about to reshuffle its cabinet. The new cabinet formation should have been announced in November, but the complexity of the negotiations have stretched the announcement.
The leader of the Sudanese Conference Party will get the foreign ministry. He enjoys a lot of support from the Prime Minister beside his international appeal. Negotiations are ongoing over the finance and the domestic governance ministries. Beside the education and the urban planning ministries, the militias are aiming to compete over the foreign affairs, finance and domestic governance as well. So it's complicated.
I understand that it appears as a quota system, but we believe that during the Sudanese transition, the Sudanese people must see that all the spectrum of society is represented in the government. The United Popular Front, though, is insisting that the experience and efficiency of candidates is taken into consideration.
The new government is expected to expand its ministries to 26 instead of the current 21. Due to the leading role he played in negotiations to lift Sudan from the state-sponsoring terror list, the Minister of Justice will probably remain in the next cabinet. The military shall be entrusted to name both the defense and the interior ministers. The Sudanese transitional government has inherited an economic crisis, international isolation, domestic division, and trust-building issues between the civil and military powers. There is no doubt its task is extremely challenging. But now there are concerns that restructuring the government after just 1 year may once again elongate the transition in Sudan. Adel Al-Marouchi, CGTN, Ras Sidr, Egypt.
Time for us to take a break. Here's what's coming up when we return. On CGTN's Pandemic Warrior series, we'll look at key individuals that kept things running at the height of the coronavirus lockdown.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, let's now turn to our CGTN's Pandemic Warrior series. Here are our anchors, Lindy Muntangana and Raman Young, with the last installment on the key individuals who kept the society running when people remained in lockdown.
Unsure and a little unsteady, the African continent threw everything it had at the coronavirus pandemic, even as it monitored and participated in efforts to find solutions. Every corner of the continent called for more medicine, more equipment, more personnel. Well, today we shine our cameras at some of the places where this help came from, the lifeblood of the battle. I'm Lindy Mtongana.
And I am Raman Yang. Indeed, Lindy, the fact of the matter is, as you very well put it, this has been and continues to be a monumental battle. It's a struggle to keep systems up and running and to help those who are at home now dealing with all these new realities that we have to be dealing with on a daily basis.
Absolutely a true test for governments across the continent. Now, a critical part of this war on COVID-19 has been the logistical struggle, keeping both people and crucial supplies moving while also fighting to stay safe from any infection. You know, Rama, it was a forced landing for many airlines as we saw international flights being grounded as well as regional flights too. And in fact, it's hard to imagine how the pilots felt, along with cabin crew and technical workers.
Indeed, it's often easy to forget that it's not just about pilots and cabin crew. There's an entire chain of personnel behind them as well. And for those who are used to flying regularly, this was basically their worst case scenario, being completely grounded. It almost feels like a bird whose wings have been completely broken. But that being said, not all flights were grounded. The lifeline around the world remained cargo flights, so we're spiriting supplies from manufacturing giants to the rest of the world. Our pandemic warrior today is one of those people. Meet Gordon Onyango. He's a cargo worker at DB Schenker in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. He's part of a dedicated team of people that ensured, despite everything that the pandemic threw at us, cargo kept moving.
DB Schenker, one of the leading global logistics companies supporting industries with exchange of goods through land, wildward freight and ocean. We visit their Kenya office and here we meet Gordon Onyango, one of the loading staff starting off his day. It's rather a tough season and the protocols here are strict. Temperature checks and hygiene are mandatory. He goes through the new normal compulsory checks. Heads to the safety room for his reflector, then he heads straight to the office for a handover brief from the night duty teams. He gets a short briefing from the air freight operations manager and heads straight to action. Today, most of the goods on transit to several destinations across the world have short shelf life. They are perishables and time is an essential aspect. Onyango and team have to beat time to make sure the goods get to the plane in good time.
We are guided with what we call a booking sheet. In the booking sheet, we're doing what we have for the day. Let's say we have a client who wants his commodities to be exported to Dubai. Now we are looking at which airline we have allocated for that booking and which volumes and which time they're supposed to be leaving from Nairobi. So that's where I allocate my guys. I go through the booking, I communicate with the clients and let them know if they are still on with their bookings or if there's any cancellations or if there's only volume increase or volume decrease. During this time of pandemic, we have noticed that we have been having low volumes. Most of the customers are not getting orders from abroad. Most of the customers are not getting orders from abroad, so we have low volume of bookings. So apparently we have been running at a level whereby you can say not above par, not below par.
Gordon's work ethic has always been admirable. One of the consistent workers at the company was made a supervisor. And for him, it's all about servant leadership. Even through the hard time, he has been able to discharge his duties, making sure he plays a role in the supply chain across the world. His seniors have so much positives to say about him.
As a person, he is a team player. He is a very motivated character and he is able to motivate his team as well. During this time, he has he's done an exemplary job because even with the decline in volumes, we have had also some staff working from home because of the COVID restrictions. But he's still been able to mobilize his teams and see that work is done within time.
We are okay, but we are hoping that things will get better because as of now we are into the high season, and as you can see, most of the airlines are now operating, unlike during the first times of the pandemic where most of the airlines had closed and their rates were so high for our clients, so we couldn't even break the margins compared to the freight charges which the airlines were giving us.
The workflow is well organized. Even as other goods are taken to the airside, other goods are still coming in from suppliers across Kenya for exports and for these workers filling in the gap during this difficult season. Indeed, these are unsung heroes who have made the world a better place. From farmer cargo, food, flowers and many other commodities. The cargo workers have been able to put smiles in many people's faces across the world. They are indeed warriors armed with hope and a big heart to make the world a better place.
A disturbing outcome of the coronavirus pandemic was the sharp rise in domestic and gender-based violence. It certainly called for another type of warrior, not those dealing with victims of the coronavirus, but rather victims of violence.
Indeed, certainly a very negative outcome of this particular pandemic. This next story comes to you from South Africa. A veteran actor in that country, Patrick Shai, says it's time for men in South Africa to start seeing women and children as human beings deserving of safety and protection, and to bring an end to gender-based violence altogether. Shai is a former perpetrator of violence against his partner, who became an activist nearly 10 years ago, when a TV drama scene that he was acting in depicted the kind of intimate partner violence he had committed for years against his wife. That was the day that the shame of his actions came crashing down, and he decided to change his ways for good. Here's CGTN's Renee Delcam with that story.
It's been 10 years since actor Patrick Shai first spoke out publicly about beating up his wife, even though he'd hated seeing his stepdad abuse his mother.
I beat her up for my own infidelities. I beat her up for my own insecurities. I would say, I want to beat you so hard that you scream, you cry, louder than my mom.
He used this public service announcement to stand up and admit to the pain he had caused.
I wanted her to love me, but how can you say that someone loves you when they are afraid of you?
Today, Patrick's main mission is to try and stop other men from perpetrating gender-based violence. He says he recently had to intervene in the lives of several violent, even suicidal men who claimed to have lost their self-worth as a result of the impact of COVID-19.
The gravity of violence against women is so intense. It borders on hate crime. If you wake up every morning, then you hear of a woman's body lying naked in the field. She was raped, killed, body incinerated.
According to police crime figures, a woman is murdered in South Africa every 3 hours. At least 51% of women experience violence at the hands of their intimate partners. And the COVID-19 lockdown only made things worse, says research psychologist Naziswa Titi.
For most families, a lockdown meant loss of jobs, right? And loss of jobs means that both parties will be at home, and that means that there will be hunger in the home, and when everybody is hungry, they are more irritable, and violence will then strike.
And from the end of March to the end of April this year, the children's helpline Childline saw an increase of 400% in calls reporting the abuse of children.
So that means then that children as well as women were in more danger at home than they were anywhere else. We live in a male-controlled and male-dominated society, where men feel entitled to women and women's bodies, and that speaks to patriarchy, where women are taught and are told that they must be subordinate to men.
What Patrick calls his Damascus moment or turning point in his life came when he had to play the role of an abusive husband in a TV show. The actress who had played his victim in the scene suddenly reminded him of his own wife when she had pleaded with him to stop beating her.
And I did not like the monster that was revealed to me. And I snapped out of it and I cried, cut, and I walked off set. And as I was walking off set, the crew was saying, what a wonderful performance. And all I could say was, it couldn't be me. Meaning, this person that I saw in that vision, it was not me. I did not like that person one bit. I hated that person.
That's when I realized that I needed to change. It was not about what anybody else said, it was about me. And with me, it had to stop.
It should not be women who should be in the forefront of men's violence against women and children. That's men's problem. It is a men problem.
Break the silence. Speak about your fears. Speak about your concerns. You are human. It is okay for a man to be vulnerable. It is not necessary for you to affirm yourself physically, to want to be a patriarchal man. Be a human being first.
Renee Dalcom, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Lindy, that is a pretty unfortunate burden that's been brought to bear on so many homes as lockdowns compelled couples to spend a lot more time together, but also in a very confined, limiting environment.
And children too, that found themselves in the same home as potential abusers. So of course, putting many families under pressure. And we're of course very happy to hear that in some cases, there were people that were there to help.
Up next, voices from across the continent.
We really need to see good things in 2021 because 2020 has been a terrible year. There was a lot of crime in our city. Our government must stamp it out next year. We don't want to see it again.
The status and the situation during the time of pandemic are very terrible. And they are terrible in such a manner that there is a lot of crisis in the economy. This is for the poor and the rich. The heat is reaching everybody.
And the good thing is that we are all we've all joined together in this fight to make sure that we can all be able to come out of it successful. So I'm very hopeful. I'm very, very hopeful that after maybe mid-2021, we'll start seeing some good numbers coming up.
Well, as the year 2020 draws to a close, one of the key questions we're often asking ourselves is, what have we learned from this year? Well, on a lighter-hearted note, I did see a meme in which somebody said, the one thing I've learned about myself in 2020 is that I have an average temperature of 36 degrees.
Well, we've all been taking our temperatures this year. But that's the thing about this particular year. It's made us focus on a lot of things that we tend to ignore. I mean, I'm not sure if it's the same for a lot of our audience, but this is the first year in at least a decade that I can personally remember when I've not had a crazy flu bringing me down. And more often than not, it'd be like I'd have 4 crazy flus every single year, and we'd probably all get it in the office. It's a very different environment. But it brings us back to that simple focus on the essentials. It's the basic simple things that have such a huge impact. Washing your hands, keeping your social distance, ensuring a much more stringent focus on hygiene. And if you expand that to the national level, we've ignored public healthcare for years. We've ignored public provision of water and sewage services for years. Yeah. And yet this pandemic has reminded us those things matter.
And you know what, Rama, the thing is, this pandemic, while it may be a first for many of us and, in our history, in our lifetimes, it won't be the last. And our preparedness will come into question time and time again. We have to do, as a continent, as a world, proper scenario planning, proper development of public health facilities so that we are never caught off guard again.
Indeed, that's certainly true. And on top of that, that does require a lot of leadership, a lot of forward thinking, a lot of forward planning as well. And that's not something we can offshore, farm out and say, yeah, well, in case that happens, we'll sort it out, we'll get some help from somewhere. We've got to do that ourselves.
And of course, on that question of leadership, Rama, some would suggest that there is a direct correlation between good leadership and survival rates in this pandemic. Well, on our COVID-19 Survivor segment, we now bring you Cape Town teacher Tasneem van Hart, who in June suffered a serious infection of the disease. She says she fears ever contracting the COVID virus ever again and warns that we should all do whatever we can so that we never have to experience the uncertainty, the stigma and isolation that she did when she was struck down by the disease. Renald Elkam brings us her story.
Until a few months ago, grade 6 teacher Tasneem van Hart was a healthy 33-year-old woman living in Cape Town with her husband. Although she was educating her school kids about the new coronavirus in the classroom, she says she never expected COVID-19 to hit too close to home.
When I first heard about COVID-19, I didn't think much about it. I didn't think that it would affect me because I regarded myself as having a strong immune system. I hardly get sick. The last time I've had the flu was 3 years ago.
Then in June, at the height of Cape Town's COVID-19 outbreak, she tested positive for the disease.
The shortness of breath and I'm not being able to breathe at night, that was the scariest, and the body ache. I came to the point of thinking these negative thoughts just ran through my head, and I was thinking, am I going to survive the night? Am I going to wake up the next morning?
She fought the virus for 14 days as her husband, Qasim Lahudin, nursed her back to health.
He hardly slept because every couple of minutes during the night he would get up. We slept in different rooms, so he would get up and he would come and check up on me to see if I'm okay, to see if I'm still breathing. I survived, I got through it, I built up my immune system. I had support of my friends and family, and I had many people give me advice and give me household remedies that I can use and drink. Daily, I tell my school kids to keep their distance, to wear their masks when they go out, to sanitize regularly. Even if they go shopping, to sanitize the products that they come home with. I keep talking to them, I tell them this virus is real. We need to stop being naive and carry on with our lifestyles as if this virus never existed. If I think back, I'm still unsure as to how I got the virus.
But one thing she does know for sure, just like doctors and nurses working on the front line of the pandemic, teachers such as herself and countless others in the classroom of 2020 are being stretched to the limit.
It's been extremely exhausting, not only for us as teachers, for the learners as well. And we had to adjust and we had to get used to the new normal. And our bodies are so run down that we get sick easily. There are teachers that get sick easily. We pick up germs easily because we are so stressed out.
And as she marks these final 2020 exam papers, teacher Van Hart is hoping that her learners will be successful and above all, stay healthy. Renald Elkam, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Many people from right across the continent have also shared their pandemic warriors through our digital platforms, Lindy.
Well, that's right. And we sifted through scores of those stories to bring you some really special ones from different corners of the continent. Take a look.
For the last 3 days, CGTN Africa has brought you unique
and compelling stories on some African warriors who exhibited heroism in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. But we also wanted to hear from our digital audience. CGTN Africa's digital media team put out a nomination video requesting digital audiences to share with us their pandemic warriors. We received lots of comments and nominations from across the continent, and from this, 3 well-deserved individuals were selected. To start us off, our first warrior nominee, a young doctor from Sierra Leone, Dr. Reginald Cole, who was nominated by Thomas Masakwe, who says Dr. Reginald was born and bred in Freetown and was also part of the medics involved in the fight against Ebola, and is now also in the forefront in combating COVID-19. Dr. Reginald was staying at the COVID-19 treatment center at the start of the pandemic and was providing medical care for the COVID-19 patients non-stop. One of the challenges we faced in the beginning of the pandemic was misinformation. With the virus spreading fast across continents, record high death rates and cases, fear started to grip through people and misinformation spread at the speed of the virus. Our second nominee, Jama Jack from Gambia, sought to address this issue in her country. Let's take a look at what she had to do.
So we developed informative posters that gave detailed information on what the coronavirus is, what the modes of transmission are, but we also created posters that had simple guides on what people can do to prevent themselves from catching the virus. We employed the use of informative videos, producing messages on prevention, producing messages on care, producing messages on the importance of social distancing, and we made sure to make these materials available in the key local languages in the Gambia. So we had it available in 6 languages, including English, and also included sign language interpretation.
The pandemic brought yet another dark side, what we would call a silent pandemic, from domestic violence to teenage pregnancies. Here in Kenya, our third nominee, Joy Ogingo, a sexual and reproductive health rights advocate, provided vital information to girls living in the village of Nyakach in Western Kenya. Let's take a look at what Kadin Abundo had to say about her. Joy ran a campaign dubbed Jenga Manzi na Boy Mtaani to educate adolescent girls and young women on dangers and consequences of teenage pregnancies in conjunction with ending menstrual poverty. To all our digital audiences who took time to nominate their pandemic warriors, and to you who made a difference in the face of a daring pandemic, from CGTN Africa's digital desk, we say thank you.
Well, 2020 has certainly proven to be a tough journey for Africa and indeed the rest of the world, Rama.
Absolutely, Lindy. But the thing with all tough journeys, though, is that it does continue to bring out the true and the selfless warriors among us. This year, if nothing else, has been a firm demonstration of resilience and grit.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a moment then to look back on some of the pandemic warriors we've spoken about, those who made a world of difference by touching the lives of others in their fearlessness, right in the face of a bold pandemic. And now we honor them with a salute. Professor Steve Ahuka, Dr. Leanne Brady and the Can community, Dumba Mohammed, Dr. Samir Girgis, and Dr. Walid Abdallah.
Moses Omondi, Gordon Onyango, Patrick Shai, Tasneem Van Hart, Benson Musungu, and Sumaya Hosseini.
Each of you, we thank you for your work, your sacrifice, and today we salute you and appreciate you.
Indeed, the days ahead will still be fairly challenging for many of us. We'll certainly all need a lot of grit and resilience to get through them. You set a fantastic example for the rest of us to follow.
Indeed, the road ahead might indeed be hard, it might be challenging, it will certainly be one that will require massive collective effort from the entire human race. The African continent itself will need to make bigger investments and even sacrifices to maintain pace with developments that try to bring this pandemic to an end, if for nothing else than just to ensure that those on the continent are not left behind.
Indeed, CGTN Africa will continue to focus on those efforts and the people like you that continue to make a vital difference to the survival of humanity, which surely must prevail. I'm CGTN's Ramanyang.
And I'm Lindy Mtongana, and this has been our special series, the CGTN Pandemic Warriors.
And with that, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember that you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. From me, Hannah Viviers, and the rest of the Africa Live team, thank you so much for watching. See you again next time.